show for those that know us. And in case those of you from Wide Days, if you don't know Music Ally, we publish information about the music business. In fact, I'm gonna pop into the chat the sign up links to our service, and because we do actually offer complimentary subscriptions, there you go, to certain constituencies. So if you're an independent label, if you work for an independent label, if you're an artist manager, if you work for a music publishing company, or if you're an artist, then you are entitled to a free subscription to our business information service. So do please have a look at that, and only if you fit the category, of course. But hopefully you'll find that quite interesting. We've been publishing information about digital and how the industry's been changing for nearly 20 years now. And and we started this TV show over lockdown, thinking that we kind of needed to keep communicating with the community out there, and have been running it ever since. So yeah, we are going to be talking. It's just the sort of the one panel this time. We're going to be talking about reshaping the music industry, and I would encourage people to ask questions in the Q&A, and we'll try and address those if we can. So let's if everybody on the panel can start their videos, we'll get going. Come out. There we go. Marvelous. So let's start with Portia, maybe, since you're in the screen next to me, as I see it. Portia from MusicBiz, Portia Sabin, if you just want to tell us who you are, a little bit about what you do.
Thanks, Paul. My name is Portia, and I am the president of the Music Business Association. We're a trade association in the US that represents many sectors of the music industry. We have major labels, independent labels, distributors. We have retail stores, managers, publishers. So a lot of people fall under our umbrella. We're best known for doing a big conference every year in May, which we obviously did not do this year. And we've pivoted, like so many of us, to online activities. So we have several seminars and conferences coming up online. Our most, the one that's coming up most quickly is next week's Next Gen Now, which is a 3-day summit for young professionals in the music industry. You can still sign up at musicbiz.org. And that should be a really great one. You should check out the lineup for sure, because it's a lot of really great speakers and keynotes.
Cool. And of course we collaborate at Music Ally and MusicBiz on a conference called Nylon, which normally takes place in New York and London, but again I think it's rather more likely to be taking place online in January this time. So thanks, Portia. Now, Sammy, you have of course already been on the TV show. You're making your second appearance today, but for those that didn't see you last time, please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I'm Sammy Andrews. I am CEO and founder of Deviate Digital. We're a digital marketing agency, but full 360 offering to the industry. We work predominantly in the UK, but also do a lot of stuff in the States. I also write and shout a lot about various music industry issues.
Indeed.
Was that fair? Was that a fair introduction?
That's fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. An agitator.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah, in a good way. And Cleo, please introduce yourself. Cleo, coming in from Paris today with a very nice musical background there.
Thank you.
Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, of course. So my name is Cleopatra. I am from Eastern Africa, hibernating in Paris during this very special time. I am responsible for music business in Eastern Africa for a big media group called Trace TV. I'm also founder of an ecosystem called SwahiliNation, which operates under House of Afro. And so we are just all-around creators, disruptors, and I find it difficult to label myself. All I can say is that I am a disruptor, curator, and I work very closely with musicians and producers to help them to just put together some of the best content that we can put out there today.
Cool. Thanks very much, Cleo. And Shain Shapiro. Shain, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Last and very much least in this group.
Oh, good Lord, no. There's still one more after you, really, because we have to introduce Patrick. So.
Of course, Patrick. Well, we can share that title. My name is Shain Shapiro. I am Canadian, but I live in London. I run a company called Sound Diplomacy. We advise cities and governments all over the world on music, strategy, and policy. And then we also run a suite of conferences that are now online too, called Music Cities Events. And we work internationally. Really, our focus is to get non-music people engaged in music. That's our objective. And non-music people tend to be politicians or people who work within economic developments, tourism, community development, and policy making.
Sure. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to hear from you in terms of how you've been affected by all of that. And last but not least is my colleague Patrick Ross, who regular people will know is the wizard of the TV show in terms of. Oh no, so you're like the producer, really, aren't you, Patrick? Is that what we call you?
Producer, moderator, IT guy, depends on what you're feeling like. But yeah, thank you very much, Paul, for having me on here. I will be hopefully saying the least, but for everyone in the audience, I'm going to be watching the Q&A. So please use the Q&A box, not the chat, if you've got a question for our panelists, and I'll be watching that and trying to make sure that we can get some of your questions answered, and the more interactive, the better. But that should be very little from me so that everyone else can speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, yeah, let's kick off. And, you know, one of the reasons I was really pleased when Olaf came to me with this idea of talking about reshaping the music industry was I think it's really interesting times that we're going through. And, you know, I think in some ways, there's so much incredibly positive stuff that's coming out, the acceleration of change just in our own business, the fact that we're doing these TV shows, which we wouldn't have done before, and a big online summit in September, which is genuinely Sandbox Summit Global. It's genuinely global because it's so much easier to get people connected all around the world in online events, which you just wouldn't have thought of doing before. The fact that our business is functioning very well remotely. We're lucky that, you know, we're in a part of the business that you know, is still doing okay. But obviously, it's been an incredibly tough time as well, and live music in particular has been one of the areas that's been most badly affected. And so I did want to sort of kick off with that one as being one of the most obvious areas of change, and looking at what's been happening within live, the good and the bad. And Portia, let's just kick off with you, because as I was saying to you earlier, listening to your excellent podcast, The Future of What, and when you were talking about a new venue association that sprung up in the US, perhaps tell us a little bit about that and the challenges that are happening in the US around live venues right now.
Well, I think everyone is facing, thanks, Paul. I think everyone's facing the same challenges, certainly when it comes to venues across the world, because, you know, obviously we can't gather in groups. It's not safe to do that yet. I think, you know, one of the weird silver linings that's coming out of this pandemic is it's weirdly bringing the music industry together. I think we're finally getting everyone on the same page that this is an ecosystem that we all participate in. And when it's threatened, when it's unhealthy, we all suffer. So I do like it in that way. Not that I would have ever wished for this to happen, but you know, so the creation of NIVA, which is the new independent venue association, trade association in the US, has been great. You know, to bring those groups together, but also to bring them into the fold, sort of talking about how, you know, we all work together. I was on the board of A2IM, which is our version of AIM in the US, which is the Indie Label Trade Association. I was on the board 13 years ago when it started. And I remember having conversations with independent label heads about how they should join A2IM. And they said, I don't need to join a trade association. I'm independent. And I feel like, you know, over the last 13 years, I watched, you know, as now many of those, I mean, all of those labels have now joined A2IM. and they are all, you know, sort of happy members, and they definitely see the point of having come together to work together. And so I feel like this might be one of those turning points in the industry is, you know, venues have, for whatever vast number of reasons, always been sort of a separate deal. And when you think about venues and you think about festivals, you think about just a huge number of people whose jobs are now completely gone. So we were talking in the chat before we started, I mean, you know, from the people who build the stages at festivals to the people who do sound at small venues, I mean, everyone's out of a job. So I think it's great that they formed this organization. And I think it's a really important thing that we're finally getting those people to be talking with us and all on the same page. You know, that can only be good, I think, for the industry in the long run.
But I presume a lot of venues are closing down. I mean, you know, we're seeing that certainly happen over here. And I, you know, talking to people in some other countries like Chile, it was just sounded desperate, the number of venues and the whole infrastructure for a level of touring that seems to be in danger of disappearing. Is that, you know, the impression that you get? That, I mean, it's going to be very hard to ride out this storm, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. And, you know, without, probably don't need to get super political, but, you know, the US isn't super great. You know, we're not a socialist country. Apparently that's very bad to be.
You could have fooled me.
Yeah, it's right up there with, I guess we're working on fascism, which will be great for everybody. Can't wait for that. It'll be awesome. But that, yeah, because we're not a socialist country, there's not a whole lot of government bailout money. And so, you know, the venues that are out of business are out of business. And there haven't been any plans put in place, to my knowledge, to help those folks out. You know, there is some pandemic insurance. There's some loans that the government has created. And then there are a bunch of bills in front of Congress that would hopefully help and target those people. But, you know, of course, we don't know how that'll go. We'll just have to see in the next few weeks if we can get some relief for those people. But still, none of that is a long-term solution. I believe, Cleo, was it you who said that France is giving 15,000 euros a month to venues?
Not 15,000, absolutely not. No, but what France has done for companies, events are off. We do not have any events happening in France right now, absolutely none. And so most of the stimulus packages, most of the support packages have gone to companies, I guess, that, you know, are struggling to pay their employees and to keep just the, you know, the everyday runnings of the companies going on. And so for those who have had employees who have a full-time job, so it's a CDE and not a contract job, those employees have had, you know, part of their salaries covered by the state through the companies, who then, you know, have like bailout packages put together by, it's called the social, the how do I put it? What I'm thinking in French right now, that have been put together by the social system. Voila, the social.
Yeah, the support. Yeah.
Voila. Yeah, but in Kenya is different. I think I'm here more to talk about what's happening in Africa, because what happened in March, we had just come off one of the biggest festival seasons in Africa in December. And then for most artists that are top tier artists in Africa, they get to travel to do shows around Europe and the US. So most of the artists that I work with were just starting their European tours, right? And then COVID hit and the borders were being locked, and the lucky ones managed to go back to Africa just before the airports shut down. And so we ended up going from having shows and bookings to suddenly, what do we do? And I work in television as well. And that meant that we had to also work on putting together TV productions from home. So, you know, my thinking was, okay, we have artists who are back home. East Africa, for example, is a huge, we rely heavily on we're like a digital ecosystem, right? So we were like, okay, how do we keep the entertainment industry going despite the fact that we are home, despite the fact that we don't have events? Now, Rwanda, I think, is the only country that has arenas. I think they have just built a new one that was 10,000 capacity, and they have another one that's 4,000 capacity. but the rest of East Africa have done events outside. So we've done mostly live events that are put up outside, right? How COVID has affected this market in Africa has been mostly the promoters. Like, you know, in most, you know, in entertainment industry, the music industry, there's so many middlemen. So you have the labels, then you have the artists, then you have the management, then you have the promoters, then you have the guys selling the tickets to the shows, and then you have the broadcast and the media partners. And what happened because of COVID is it went from the artist directly to the consumer with the person that makes this possible for whatever they're trying to put out. So in East Africa, we just went straight into digital events. So we started to put together digital productions powered by TV stations, and the brands worked directly with us to fund these events. And so within no time, within 2 or 3 weeks, we started just, you know, shooting the content and in very controlled environments and making sure everybody, you know, health and safety was really, really key in this case. And so we just took the live event experience from a venue to television and YouTube and to the digital space. And so the artists were able to monetize a little bit, you know, even if it's not, you know, the kind of money they're used to getting for big shows, it's some kind of revenue that was coming in. Now, not all of East Africa was on lockdown. Tanzania is not on lockdown, so their business as usual. Kenya was on total lockdown. Uganda is on lockdown. Rwanda was also observing a lot of controls during this period. And so I think what COVID-19 has done for artists in Africa, because Africa is huge, you have West Africa a little bit more, you know, they have artists who are a little bit more established, if I can put it this. So they're top tier artists who work under a machinery, right? With the huge labels and the Live Nations putting together, you know, shows at Bercy, shows at, you know, Wembley Arena. So Nigerian artists do arenas, right? So I think their ecosystem was a little bit affected, because there were a lot of shows and events that were lined up for them. Those who are from like my side, which is Eastern Africa, where I would say maybe 1 or 2 artists do international shows. 99% of artists in East Africa are independent, and just so the income generation model in the East is completely different. It's directly from brands, it's endorsements, it's live events. So they just went from, okay, I can't perform in front of an audience. I will just perform in front of an audience through a station or through YouTube or through private links that were set up during this time just to broadcast the events. So
most of that stuff is freely. Sorry, that was a bit of an echo. Most of that stuff is free to access, right? You're not having to pay.
Yeah, right. So everything is free to access for the person consuming the music, right? For the audience. But for the artist, it's monetized by brands. So like the telcos that went from having events, you know, like most of the marketing strategies for telcos and brands in Africa is through live events. So where you from not being able, you know, today you have a show in this town or that village or city, etc. To we cannot move anymore. The brands had to now bring this revenue to companies that would be able to still give them that audience, right? So the live events, yeah.
I'm interested actually, because that's an interesting question in terms of, you know, to charge or not to charge. I mean, obviously there's advertising, there's brand supported, but what do people think about the viability of charging for online events? It seems that we're getting a little bit more used to that idea now. Is that right? Do you think that people are not so much? Obviously, it depends on the audience and where you're targeting, but everything surely doesn't have to be free just because it's online.
I don't think it should be free. Actually, it should be cheap. And I think there are some, like in Congo, for example, there is a company that has put together pay per view. So you pay to watch the concert. And thank God for mobile banking, which is M-Pesa. I know, sorry to interrupt, but for M-Pesa, for example, You know, I don't have to go through my Visa card to pay for a show. And yeah, process is very quick with M-Pesa, which is mobile banking. So they've integrated these payment systems onto these platforms, and they're using WhatsApp and they're using Instagram, using all the DSPs to advertise. And so the consumer can just go onto their phone and pay concert to watch someone in Congo. So Congo has done that, and Nigeria is doing that as well. And I think this is the model that has to continue here on, which is to bring, as technology advances, right? Because I'm also going through a very interesting technological change in how we share content, how we consume content, how we communicate with fans, how we monetize, etc. As this technological advantage change, I think the model of ticketing and payment as well, and how concert experiences will be. Yeah.
Okay. And let's hear from Sammy and Shain in terms of this, you know, what you think about the viability of like, you know, alternative forms of concerts online, whatever form they are, and how viable they are in terms of monetization.
Yeah, well, interesting. Actually, I hosted a panel yesterday with Rick Salmon from ATC, who's done Laura Marling, Nick Cave. They've got loads more lined up, and also Russ, who's I think he's CFO, CMO at Dice.
At Dice, yeah.
And we chatted through what they've been doing. Certainly, you know, to Cleo's point, the majority of stuff has been free, and it's been everywhere. And I mean, to the extent where I genuinely suspect the majority of people have switched off their Instagram live notifications and never want to see one again. But I think what's changed and what you know, Cleo said that's really interesting is the production value. I think is an interesting one. So at the start of this, the panic and, you know, everyone trying to do it from their bedroom, but actually brands definitely have seen, you know, a potential for it. And I know in the UK, there's large financial organizations that wanted to sponsor a lot of stuff, large telephone and companies, and, you know, that there's brands out there for sponsorship, but that still doesn't convert in the way that a ticket sold converts. And I think what we're starting to see now, and is that missing part, and I think Lewis Capaldi did one with Dice as well, but they're clearing decent numbers. I mean, what was it BTS cleared? Was it 20 million?
Some of those numbers are just outrageous, aren't they? Yeah.
So that you've got that, you know, on a stratospheric level. But I think some of the artists that are trying it now are quite interesting. So it makes a lot of sense to me that an established artist, of course, you've got access to a fan base, and I think actually if you provide a decently produced offering, that makes sense. And I mean, it's something that it's baffled me that artists haven't done it a bit ahead of COVID. You know, there's no possible way, if we take COVID out of this for a while, there's no way that every artist can tour every country in the world. And what happened with the digitization of music is it became globalized. You know, you used to have to wait to go to a record shop close to you, and now you can stream it anywhere and listen to it anywhere. But touring didn't follow suit. Touring is still something predominantly that you had to physically go and see. A band had to be in your area. So I think certainly that, you know, the managers that I'm talking to are really looking at this as not just something to get them through COVID to keep artists busy and monetize, but to actually provide incremental revenue when this is all over, and the opportunities that it opens up as well. You know, merch is flying out the door on live shows. It's people are still viewing it as a specific one-off, and it's selling really well across every show that I'm aware of. But
it was Laura Marling that tried the locked gigs as well, wasn't it?
There's a reason for that. I mean, so Rick Salmon actually talked about it on our panel yesterday. He said what people are starting to grasp again is the globalization. If you do a stream at 7 p.m. in the UK, you'll hit the lunchtime in the US, but you've lost pretty much everyone, you know, going out to the East. So what they're experimenting with, which makes a lot of sense to me, is time delay, so that it will still go live at an appropriate time in your territory, which makes so much sense. But then you've got to work around, well, is it because there's different versions of live shows happening now? Is it live like actual your pants live, anything could go wrong? Or like the Nick Cave one that went last night, beautiful production, Nick Cave alone in Ali Pali, filmed in Ali Pali, or, you know, Laura Marling, Union Chapel, pre-filmed. So there's those two sides, but then you can't talk about live stream in that capacity and monetization without talking about the lack of licensing across the free platforms. So it's okay if you've got a brand sponsor to pay for all that. But if you haven't, there's fuck all in the way of licensing across any of the platforms. Then, you know, it's something that I know is a big conversation, both for the platforms and for rights holders at the moment, in how that looks going forward. And I think, sadly, to what everyone else has said, it took COVID to do it. These licensing conversations should have happened 10 years ago, but there was no real need or urgency, and now they are. And I think, into everything you've said, I think that this whole chaos has actually probably pushed us forward 5 years in development, because we're a tricky industry to get to do anything without being poked sometimes, I think.
Let's bring Shain in here. And I mean, your work depends so much on physical venues, doesn't it? I mean, it must be hugely affected.
Yeah, it is. It's a bit of a misnomer. I think most people, when they think about music, they only think about live music, because we all have a cognitive dissonance that we only care about the created, and who doesn't really matter the process of creation, especially to the 99.9% of people in the world who do not work in the music industry but consume. I think there's, I can't speak really in terms of licensing in digital and live streaming. I'm not Sammy and Cleo. I'm no expert. But what I can say, what we're trying to say to our clients, who are mainly cities or tourism boards. Tourism is probably the only sector that's been worse affected by COVID than the music and wider performing arts sector. They're in real trouble. And mainly because in a lot of places their money's made from hotel tax and no one's staying in hotels. But I see this unique opportunity from a talent development perspective, where local music will be the only live music when live music begins to return. So prioritizing talent development around local music, there's just more incentive to do that rather than continuing to import music in. There's a couple places that we've looked at that are white labeling their own live streaming platform. So it's like a city music venue, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
And
that's interesting.
And that's a way to essentially provide opportunities for local artists and pay them at least a standard rate, where they may not have that opportunity if they were just competing commercially, and within our sector. So, I'm the hope. I'm always the optimist in the room, I feel, but I also recognize the extreme challenges. But the fact that live music is not the music ecosystem, live music is a part of the music ecosystem. One of the main issues that we face right now is the consistent defunding of music education. In terms of, in the UK, they're prioritizing certain subjects. At least in the UK, they can go back to school, Portia, it says, but they're prioritizing certain subjects to catch up from the time that's lost. Music's not included in those subjects. I know in lots of, obviously in lots of markets in Africa and other places, obviously formal music education is lower down the list of priorities. And at the same time, one of the last thing is one of the things that I see as an opportunity, but it's very sensitive, is simply the fact that we are really bad at data management as a sector. There's a lot of money that isn't making it to people where it should. The black box thing to the attendees, because of our inability to manage metadata properly over a long period of time. And then if you look at markets, I guess, Cleo, you look at markets that don't have functioning collection societies. So if you don't even have a functioning collection society, how can you go to a government and say, being a musician is an entrepreneur like any other entrepreneur? So they should be treated like any other entrepreneur. It's very, very difficult. So I see now there's an opportunity for us to potentially, clean up the back of house, a la why you have a bedroom, Paul. Instead of showing the back of your bedroom, clean up the back of house and
I want to come to the government and the legislation side at the end of
Yeah,
our
so
talk, but
I think there's so much opportunity. The ingenuity of our sector is really on show right now. So we just have to keep prioritizing and demonstrating how clever we are collectively.
I want to pick up on that ingenuity because you know, I've had so many conversations with different people from different companies who have seemed to have embraced, as we have done, I think, at Music Ally as well, this kind of, you know, this new way of working and realizing that actually you can function as a business perfectly well. Depends on the nature of the business, obviously. Not everyone can, but remote working across the board, you know, not just in music, but just you know, across all sectors, particularly in the UK. But I think, you know, surely to a degree in most countries worldwide as well, it's becoming more and more common, and seems to be one of those things that perhaps is going to stay a little bit like that afterwards. So things will not necessarily go back to the same again. And I you know, that's the question really, whether it's you want to talk about that or not, or maybe something else. I'm interested in those changes that are permanent. You know, there's going to be
what you just cited with remote working. Every company, large and small, that I talk to is saying the same. And so I can hear an echo on my voice, Patrick. But everyone's looking at either downsizing. There's all the companies having discussions also with members of staff, you know, and how that looks going forward. Our company have always done it. We only insisted that people came into the office 3 days a week. So it wasn't such a big change for us, because by the very nature of our business, we're digital, and we're very fortunate that our business went through the roof, you know, when that lockdown happened. And I feel very fortunate, you know, to be able to say that. But those sort of implications, you know, how does that work in terms of team hiring? I've had to hire over lockdown. Trying to hire on Zoom is a really funny thing. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of challenges coming, but again, I feel like it's pushing us along. And, you know, to Black Box was mentioned there, you know, and I know the previous panel that I was on, and I won't rant about it here, but things like the Broken Record campaign are actually poking the music industry and pushing it, going, right, now is time to get your house in order and make sure that, you know, that it is a fairer place, especially for creators and for songwriters. And I think everyone's having those things now. Even, you know, in the States, we've got, you know, Live Nation and AEG around the same boards. We've got, there is a real feeling, although it'll go back to competition, there is actually a proper, you know, tangible feeling of working together for change. Who knows if it'll last? But that it fills me with some hope that actually some of these progressions are actually positive, I think, and some of them will certainly last.
What about other people in terms of other changes that you think, you know, are likely to be a little bit more longer lasting, that they're not so temporary in nature, whether it's commercial, business, or
I don't know, Paul. I mean, I think, I'm sorry.
Go on.
I think, you know, there were several things about having online events that have seemed very quickly to become kind of better than having in-person events, which is weird. And I wasn't expecting that at all. You know, Music Biz, our annual conference is about 2,400 people. But when we did our Music Biz Live series, which was 4 days of keynotes, sort of high-level keynotes in the 4 days that would have been Music Biz in May, we had 4,700 people come from 47 countries.
Wow.
And that's, you know, that's the type of reach that you just don't get when you have a physical in-person event. You know, that the sort of no borders aspect of the internet has been really amazing in that way.
Do you think people will still want to, you know, attend online events when we have physical events again?
Or incremental revenue. Surely the same way that we're talking about live events,
sure,
this should be a supplementary potential revenue and a complete way to reach those people. Sorry.
No, I agree with you, Sammy. I think that's so true. It's like, so if we have, you know, if and when, knock wood, we go back to physical events, you know, if we had an online component so that people in Nigeria or Kenya or wherever wanted to come, but they couldn't afford to take a plane and they couldn't afford to stay in a hotel for a week, you know, but it's a $50 ticket or whatever, I believe that that's supplemental revenue, as you said.
I think there's a couple of things. One is we shouldn't be touring at the rate that we were prior to COVID, simply because of climate emergency.
Yeah.
It does not make, it's unjustifiable. And we have to come up with a sustainable, an economically sustainable way to, I can hear myself too, but it's fine. Economically sustainable way to make money touring as much. And the last thing is, some like really crazy ideas have been pitched in the last 3 months that would never have gotten the light of day, that are in official government documents now and being beta tested around, you know, there's even one place that we're looking at creating a music development bank, like an actual bank, like an inner development bank, because you can prove that music rights are recession proof. So if you invest in them as a patient capital mechanism, and you talk about them as an investment, this is something that pisses me off, to be honest, this whole concept of relief. It further victimizes us as victims, when is, you know, I believe that it's investment, because music is an investable proposition. I'm really hopeful about that. I'm like, some of the things that
where is that taking place? Where is it? Oh, you can't say. I thought
so that's just one example. There's a few others.
Yeah.
We've shoehorned some ordinances into cities that have made things a lot fairer that I never thought we'd ever get, I promise. And even the a lot of the work in the UK around the 1.7 billion with, you know, relief program, and the recognition of government of the value of a lot of different sectors of music, not all, but a lot, is incredible.
Apart from comedy and circuses, was it?
And nightclubs.
Nightclubs, yeah, who were all, they're just weirdly excluded, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long story. Yeah.
And Cleo, let's come to you and hear about other changes in Africa as well. And again, sort of, you know, things that you more positive changes that you think sort of might be beneficial.
Yeah, I think that COVID-19 has really changed the landscape of how we consume music, how we package music, how we export music, how we reach people. And, you know, one of the things that I think for me has, you know, my background is in business, but it's also in documentary. And we're living through times right now where I feel like I'm talking about my genre of music, which is Afro-urban music, right? The way we have been packaging music. So you shoot a music video, you know, and you have the lovely cars and all this, and then you have a 3-minute, 4-minute music that's put out on television and all that. I think all that is going to change and is changing, because I don't think with what people are going through right now, you know, with a lack of jobs, lack of income, lack of travel, I think what we put in this content changes. And so it inspires me to inspire the artists within my ecosystem to think differently about how they use visuals and content to sell their music. And so we're creating things like music stories, for example, which is between documentary and music video, which are much cheaper, if that makes any sense, because a music video costs, a good video costs anywhere between $7,000 to $10,000. In some cases, it goes up to even $20,000. When you're not traveling, when you're not doing shows, when you're not getting enough endorsements, this is expensive. No one can afford this. And also, the value of videos in Africa is to encourage and to promote you to have bookings for events and shows, right? So when you know that there's not going to be events to the end of the year and at the top of 2021, how you then package your content should be geared towards these. You want to encourage streaming because that's where your money is coming from. That's where your revenue is going to come from. And so I would like for Patrick to share this when I share this. I think what is reminding artists, what is reminding the creative system, one, in the absence of travel, you have no other choice to work from within and to build from within. right? So your audience is not in China, some audience is not in Dubai somewhere, your audience is not in Malta somewhere where you're going to do a show. Your audience is at home. The person who's going to consume your content is at home. And how you're going to sell it should attract the people closer to you, because when things pick up again, not be able to travel immediately to America, you'll first have to do your shows back home until it eases and it's easier for people to travel and the borders open. And so stories for me were great, were a great opportunity of storytelling through music, but using images that people can relate. And this is the beauty of it. This is the beauty of it. This is where you tap tourism and music business, because through music stories, we're able to remind people how beautiful your ecosystem is, how beautiful your local, I don't know, park is, or how beautiful your local river is, or all the monuments that we have. So a lot of content that we're putting together, that I'm encouraging the artists to put together, showcases their home and showcases their ecosystem. And especially in my sector, where we have issues like Black Lives Matter and the diaspora is trying to connect together, I'm saying to people, Africa is, and what a beautiful way, what a better way to showcase home than to incorporate that to your images. So Patrick, I don't know if you can share this. This is really exclusive to you. It's called Navikenzo from Tanzania, and they are releasing their album in just over a month, actually. And I was like, guys, we need to create something that tells the story of Tanzania, music in Tanzania, and Swahili. You know, Swahili speakers are over 250 million worldwide. That's what people don't realize. Africa is not just Nigeria, Ghana, etc. We have groups and we have community, and the Swahili community is one of the most famous one, because I know you've watched The Lion King. The Lion King is on East Africa. You know, it's Hakuna Matata. Everyone has heard, if anyone has ever heard the word Hakuna Matata, that's Swahili for no stress. So this culture and this group of people, 250 million strong, we are trying to use music and content to just showcase this part of the world with the rest of the world. So I don't know if Patrick, you can share this, and then I'll come back to the different elements in this content that we put out.
Yep. We're good to go. Here comes the video.
Yeah.
You can't tell my story better. I believe in my culture. For me, this is my pride.
And for me, this is my life. I cannot tell the African story, but I can tell the story of the African mob.
My African people.
You're muted.
So let me tell you guys why this content is, in my opinion, the beginning of a destructive process. Is because most artists, you know, have a song, then they give them a budget, then they shoot the music video, and it ends up on MTV or you know, other TV platform that exists out there. In Africa, all the young kids aren't, right? Everyone is on their phone. They are not watching television anymore. And music videos were created when MTV was created. I think that's when the first music video really put out. The commercial music video was born when MTV was created. We're living at a time now where content for young people is being consumed on the mobile phone, especially in Africa. So what we're trying to do is to use this kind of content. It showcases the energy behind the project, so you feel the inspiration behind the project. 2, you get to see the artist. 3, you get to experience Tanzania, where they're from. 4, you get to experience the culture. And 5, most importantly, is that content ends up on platforms like TikTok, platforms like Triller, which has had a huge success in Africa, and trying to use these platforms to connect musicians directly to young people in Africa, but with a relatable story, which is.
I'm just conscious of time, Claire. We've only got 10 minutes left,
Yeah,
and
I'll be quick. Basically, that's one of the things that's changed. I think is just the fact that we are changing the way that we are generating content, how it's being used.
Yeah.
And,
Leo is completely right. I mean, the music video is pretty much dead, I think. It genuinely, for all the reasons that she just listed, she's the second person I've had this discussion with this week. People, because they realize they need content now for all those reasons, it's short. And we've never, as a digital agency, ever have been so bombarded, whether it is filming in a venue, you know, somewhere around, whether it's filming a concert in an unused venue, whether it's social content, which was always honestly at the back of most people's list. They knew they needed some, they didn't know they needed a lot. And that budget refined, you know, changing the budget around. I completely agree with Chloe that I think we're going to see a lot more pumped into actual content, and not just the big players. The big players will always do videos. I think everyone will always do a video, but if you've got a limited budget, I think you will absolutely see it pushed into content and not into music video.
So we just got less than 10 minutes left. I just wanted to make sure that we did sort of touch on some of the big stuff that government and the industry as a whole should be doing to help to ensure that we do have a healthy ecosystem going forward. So if I can just ask you all to, you know, have a little think about that for some last sort of closing comments here. You know, what do you think are the kind of the really most pressing issues that the government and or the industry itself should be addressing in terms of, you know, creating the healthier industry going forward? Who'd like to kick off with this one?
Well, I can
Portia.
I can say that you know, one thing that has come out of this so far is that the loans that the government has made available, when they first started, they really didn't take into account how workers in our industry earn money. You know, most people in America get a paycheck, and of course, as we know, artists and songwriters and many people in our industry do not just get a, you know, every 2 weeks paycheck. So there have been some changes made to that legislation, and I'm thinking that down the road it might be nice if you know, the understanding of how people earn money in our sector sticks in the government, and so future programs can also be geared towards people. You know, there's also the potential for future tax credits that might stick and be available to people in our sector. So I'm hoping that those things do come along and stay. I mean, you know, obviously it's great that it's happening right now, but we need it to stay for the people in our industry, because our industry, so many people in our industry have, you know, are sort of, what do you call it? It's not steady work, right? It's up and down, cyclical.
Yeah,
so
sure.
We need help.
Shain?
Obviously, it's different in every country. I think the first big picture one, recognize that IP is intellectual property's property. You know, so you don't let people just suddenly steal things from your house when you let them in. A lot of governments really lack the comprehension to understand that. Echo what Portia said, and I think this is the onus of the industry, is that we have to explain how we make money better, because it's confusing, and politicians do not like confusing things. They don't have time. And again, everything has to be answered for them before they can answer it themselves. 3, I'm hoping that our sector becomes more politically active, and so much that those involved in it vote and recognize that, especially local government, has a lot of impact on the ability or benefits of our sector. And 4, you know, I'm hoping that there's a shift in society that we lead that helps recognize the external value of music. Because I think our business is obsessed with the internal value of music. And, you know, we never talk about, imagine exercising without music. You know, look at the impact that music has on dementia sufferers. Music is so much more powerful than we make it out to be, because we're obsessed with our music, and our music isn't the music. And I think that I'm hoping that maybe I'm more pragmatic than optimistic here, but I hope that if we can find ways to better explain that, then we can create better tax and regulatory infrastructure to demonstrate that a corrupt collection society is unacceptable, to demonstrate that not recognizing that, musicians are businesses and entrepreneurs is not acceptable, and that everything has to be done through the eyes of racial and gender equity, and that opportunities need to be available to everyone, regardless of what you look like and where you live. And right now, that's not the case. So we have a lot.
To that. Thank you, Shain. Cleo, what would be the one thing for you that you want the industry all done?
With government is regulation. In Africa is regulation around collecting, collector agencies, making sure that artists paid for someone to play their music on radio fairly. Second thing is to make sure that the government understands that artists and independent labels are stars. Don't give them loans, invest in them. And these regulation, these structures have to be put in place for them to be able to, for banks to be able to invest in them, actually, is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sammy?
A million things, but I'll keep it short. I genuinely, think that what everyone said, but our industry actually needs to get its shit together even before we're going to the government. There's a lot of money left on the table. There's a lot of very questionable practices when there's a lot of technology there that could solve that. But that would feed into being able to explain to the government how valuable we are if we actually have our own house in order. And I think, while I know there's a lot of people at the moment in the UK, pressing for regulation across how even streaming services pay out or how they interact with the industry. But actually, I think it's a predominantly internal conversation that we need to have. And I do think the value of music coming out of this, even if you look, I know that there's various lobby bodies here fought in the UK for when pubs and restaurants reopened, they had to fight for music to be allowed to be played in them, that it wasn't originally going to be part of the deal, it was going to be switched off. And that's now helping, feed in. I think, to everyone's point, the fact that our industry even starting to engage with the government in a meaningful way is helpful, but I hope that continues. And I think we definitely need to get our crap in order so that we can present it in a way that makes sense and shows real value.
Makes complete sense. And Patrick, I am going to give you the last word because you've been sitting there patiently. We've had a very quiet audience today. So you need to speak and tell us, what do you think the industry or government should be doing?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. And yes, we did a very quiet crowd today. I guess everyone's answered everything. Thank you, everybody. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say education once again, in the sense that I'm so thankful, Sammy, for coming back and doing this. I know that we've all been doing a lot of talking on these topics, and I think we often find ourselves talking to an industry audience, which is fantastic. And I think we need to educate ourselves because I'm sure we know those around us that don't even quite understand the sort of fragility of the artists that we work with. And I think that's one portion of it. But also, hopefully there's a few tuned in today, also the artists side, that there's an education process across the board. As much as we're trying to explain to our governments how this thing works, if we're not actually educating each other and reminding each other of the real fragility of this industry and this creative industry, and at the end of the day, the people and the creatives, let's call them, that allow us to all have these discussions and these debates, that if we don't educate ourselves and the artists themselves don't educate, then nothing is going to change. But hopefully more of these dialogues will continue on. We're all feeling vulnerable right now because of the current global situation, but hopefully we take some of this and realize that we're much closer than we all thought, and that a lot of us are far more fragile than we ever thought, and really just educate ourselves, and knowledge is power. Thank you very much, Paul.
Knowledge is indeed power. Couldn't agree with you more. Well, look. Actually, we've had one question right at the end from Frank Gelladin, and I guess let go on then. We'll, if anyone wants to have a go at answering that one, which is what will drive revenue generation for digital live shows.
It's going to be partners and platforms. I spoke to, in the last week, a lot of platforms that have fully understood that that's an area, and actually also existing, like Dice, existing ticketing providers who have the infrastructure and the know-how to be able to put that, to connect fans in the right way, that's not through a social network. There's a lot of them though still figuring out the back end. There's a lot of them figuring out where that stream's held, how to stop that stream being shared once people have paid money for it. But the numbers are working, but I think it will be driven by the platforms and the monetary side of it. There's money coming in. I've seen so many incredible examples this week alone of money being generated. It's there. I think it's much more harder for new artists to be speaking openly than established, but I think there's a piece there to make it work. But it is coming in. It's definitely coming in. I've seen it.
Okay. Anybody else? Are we good on that? All right. We're going to wrap up there, and thank you to those people that have just said thank you. This is very interesting as well. We appreciate that. And yes, bang on time, eh? Not too bad. So thanks to Sammy, thanks to Cleo, thanks to Shain, thanks to Portia, and of course thanks to you, Patrick, and thanks to Olaf and Wide Days for inviting us to do this. We will be back with the regular host on August the 7th for a Music Ally TV show. So you'll all get informed about that if you've not sort of heard that before, where we'll be looking at all the different elements that go into a campaign and how you put those all together. So that'll be back to more of the kind of digital marketing type focus that we normally do. Hope you enjoyed it. I certainly really enjoyed it. And yeah, appreciate everybody taking time out to have a chat about this. And let's hope we can all make a beautiful music industry of the future. Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone.